Hey everybody, it's Johnny Two-Face here, back with another reaction video. This time I'm reacting to Napoleon's first campaign, The Defeat of Piedmont 1796 by PMF Productions. Now, I just want to give a quick shout out to LightX Heaven who brought this to my attention, and this talks about Napoleon. Apparently this talks about Napoleon's first campaign just after his victory at Toulon against the European allies. And this talks about his first campaign into Italy, which for some reason Epic History TV didn't put in their series, which feel free to check out my reaction to the Epic History TV series about the Napoleonic Wars. But this talks about obviously this talks about Napoleon's first his campaign into Italy, and as I said, PMF Productions, by the looks of it, are a brand new history channel here on YouTube, and apparently their production is similar to Epic History TV. So I haven't watched any of their videos yet, but last time I checked they only had 6 videos. So the usual disclaimer when I react to anything historical, if I don't show what's considered a proper reaction, is probably obvious that I don't know much about the subject at hand, and if I do know anything, I'll most likely pause the video to give my input or ask any curious questions which hopefully should be answered in the comments below. So with that being said, the link to the original video will be in the description down below. Please go and subscribe to PMF Productions, support their channel, help them grow, and hopefully I wish them well, and I hope their channel does well. Anyway, without further ado, let's get this up on screen and let's get into this.
Europe, 1796. During 4 years of unremitting struggle, revolutionary France has fought off the great powers of Europe, who fear that France's liberal ideals will spread to their empires.
Yeah, that was quite a big victory for the new French Republic, even though it was them who declared war first. Apparently, as I said, feel free to correct me if that's wrong. Yeah, I think I have a theory. I just want to throw a quick theory out there, and this is just my opinion, but I think another reason that doesn't get I think another sort of, I would say, reason that the other European powers were not at first willing to go with these new liberal reforms, because I think of they've seen how extreme the revolution is, especially when it's been controlled by the Jacobins, which were like the extremists within the new French Republican government. So when the Jacobins ruled, because it started off as the moderates were in charge, then the Jacobins, or the extremists, if you want to call them that, who were basically put in charge, were commanded by Maximilian Robespierre. Sorry, I just lost my words then. Because the new republic the revolutionaries guillotine the king and queen, which you'll have to look up about the French Revolution to understand why. But yeah, it's been what others have described, dealt summary justice to those suspected enemies of the new republic, the new revolutionized republic. And from what I remember learning about the French Revolution, it went to quite a lot of extremes, but it was a great victory for France, a deep blow to the other European powers, because at this time the French army didn't have many officers, since most French officers were aristocrats, and and only got their ranks by political connections. So they had a lack of shortage of officers and a lot of higher ranking officials. So yeah, long story short, Maximilien Robespierre, who was in charge of the French Republic for a time, went a bit mental and made the revolution more extreme, until him and his Jacobins were eventually overthrown and sent to the guillotine, as you can see here. So yeah, and I believe 1796, this is just after Napoleon's victory at Toulon. So anyway, let's just get back into this.
Desperate for military success, the Directory of France, which is neither competent nor popular, has decided to go on the offensive against Austria, the greatest threat to the French Republic. 3 armies are to converge and then advance on Vienna to end the war. But the corrupt Directory neglects to supply its armies, and the commanders seldom cooperate, leaving the offensive doomed to failure. That is, until a brilliant young general arrives to take command of the southernmost army, the Army of Italy. 26 years old and untested in command. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte, and he will change.
For those who don't know, Napoleon was originally born in Corsica, which used to belong to the Republic of Genoa. Well, it belonged to Genoa, let's just put it that way. Which then, Corsica then for a short time gained its independence until Genoa invited France to invade and take over Corsica. And because Corsica was originally an Italian island, Napoleon's name, if I remember rightly, at first was pronounced Napoleone Buonaparte, before he changed it to sound more French, Napoleon Bonaparte. So and bear in mind, he was recommended by a fellow Corsican, Salicetti. Anyway, before I ramble on to it, let's get in.
Change everything.
26 as well.
A lack of government support, unpredictable payments to soldiers, and appalling conditions have reduced the French army of Italy from over 100,000 soldiers down to 38,000 fighting men. The army has been forced back to the frigid Alps and parts of the northern Italian coastline, which are continuously harassed by the British Navy. In spite of possessing some talented generals forged by the Revolution, the French army of Italy has stagnated. Any hope of glory has long since left the rank and file, while the continued losses and a neglectful government threatens to collapse what remains of the army of Italy. Meanwhile, the coalition has been enjoying relative success in Italy. Despite historical grievances, the revolution has united both Piedmont and Austria in an uneasy alliance against France. The rich plains of central Italy keep the 30,000 Austrian and 25,000 Piedmontese soldiers well supplied on the French frontier. Their commanders are experienced, though many are elderly and used to an older, more measured type of warfare. Nevertheless, they are confident in plans to push the French out of Italy once and for all. In late March, Bonaparte arrives to take command of the army of Italy, but he is initially met with resentment by the leading generals. General Bonaparte is much younger, far less accomplished, and lacks experience in command. His appointment is seen as a result of his political connections, frustrating the leading generals, who have earned their rank through hard work and perseverance.
For those who are familiar with the French Revolution, I'm not trying to sound. I'm sorry if I sound a bit like a dick, but can you see the irony here of what the narrator just said?
It doesn't take long for Bonaparte to assert his control. After an initial inspection, the disorderly troops are quickly reorganized and prepared for deployment. Provisions are gathered from all over southern France, and management over the unreliable supply system is immediately improved.
See, just after Toulon, you see more of Napoleon's feat of organization.
Most importantly, Bonaparte prepares a new, bold plan of attack, which he formulated in the prior 2 years while making a careful examination of the Italian theater. Months of inaction and poor planning are wiped away, replaced by the vision, inspiration, and leadership of the new commander. Bonaparte has brought new life to the army of Italy, but he will need to act fast and decisively in the campaign ahead, or fade into obscurity like the many who came before him.
And again, shows Napoleon's talent of how he boosts the morale of his troops, no matter how unorganized or raw they are. He has another good thing you can say about Napoleon is how he inspires his troops, which served him well throughout pretty much all his career, near enough. Well, most of his career.
As winter gives way to spring in 1796, both France and Austria are amassing their forces in preparation for attack.
Nice map design.
The main Austrian army, led by the 71-year-old General Beaulieu, is concentrating north of the key seaport of Genoa. Beaulieu believes the French are planning an attack on Genoa in order to disrupt coordination with the British Mediterranean Naval Squadron, vital to expel the French from northern Italy. His plan is to use the bulk of his forces to drive out the isolated French garrison at the port of Voltri and maintain control of the northern Italian coastline. But Beaulieu's obsession with an imagined French attack on Genoa leads him to send only 8,000 soldiers with Argento to defend the strategic mountain passes, the only viable connection linking the Austrian and Piedmontese armies. Beaulieu also commands Argento to drive the French from Montenotte in hopes of diverting some of the main French army away from Genoa. The two conflicting objectives leave Argento with no option but to break apart his already small force, and he quickly becomes overextended. 50 miles to the west, General Colley and his 25,000 Piedmontese are to remain dispersed among the many mountain passes, towns, and depots of Piedmont, ready to defend against an anticipated French direct assault. Beaulieu's decision to split up his forces and leave isolated garrisons across the countryside are actions common among generals of the era, but will prove calamitous in the campaign ahead, as Bonaparte introduces a new, fast-paced style of war.
And if you remember, Napoleon adapted his army to the corps system later, which was later on imitated by every military across the globe.
Bonaparte, knowing that he will be outnumbered if his opponents are able to combine forces, begins enacting his daring plan. Aware
Divide
of
and conquer.
dispositions, he prepares to concentrate his reorganized and reinvigorated army near Savona so they can strike quickly. The army is to advance north to the strategic road junction at Dago. exploiting the gap between the Austrian and Piedmontese armies, which Argenteau struggles to defend. With superior numbers, Bonaparte will drive Argenteau's small forces towards the safety of the main Austrian army further east, before turning back to crush the scattered and now isolated Piedmontese. As dawn broke on the 10th of April, General Beaulieu's troops emerged from the mountain passes surrounding Voltry to assault the French garrison. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the French stubbornly hold until nightfall, whereupon they fall back to rejoin Massena's vanguard near Savona. General Beaulieu, pleased with his victory and believing he stopped the attack on Genoa, decides not to pursue the fleeing French. He now directs Vukasovic, an aggressive and experienced general, to take 3,500 men and support the overextended Argenteau. However, Voltry is far from Montenotte, and this support will take time to arrive. To the west, Argenteau is following Beaulieu's orders to drive the French from Montenotte. Although successful in capturing some of the forward French bastions, his effort to storm the main redoubt on Monteneghino stalls with heavy losses.
Wow.
Beaulieu's early offensive and capture of Voltry catches Bonaparte by surprise. However, it also reveals that the main Austrian army is far from Bonaparte's line of attack. Reacting rapidly to this intelligence, Bonaparte orders General Augereau to take his main force and head to Melissimo. He then turns his attention to crushing Argenteau. Divisional Commander La Harpe is sent to reinforce the French defenders on Monteneghino, while Bonaparte advances up the Bormida Valley with General Massena's vanguard to hit Argenteau's right flank. Marching through heavy mud and broken trails, Massena's vanguard emerges from thick fog and strikes the exposed Austrian flank, while La Harpe launches a pinning attack from atop Monteneghino to keep them in place. Argenteau's forces collapse, having been caught completely off guard.
I dread to think what it's like to fight in this era in the mountains.
Argenteau himself leads the escape, as his remaining troops are being routed. Bonaparte, bolstered by his success, orders La Harpe to remain near the battlefield as rearguard, while he and Massena continue on to meet up with the main column. Late on the 12th of April, they unite with General Augereau at Carqueret, but the difficult terrain has left much of Augereau's forces strung out on the road, and most have not yet arrived. Believing the Austrians sufficiently defeated, Bonaparte plans to concentrate his forces for an attack on Colley's dispersed Piedmontese army before they can unite, while Massena continues on to seize Dago. Augereau, leading the advance against Colley,
Again, more divide and conquer.
encounters a small Piedmontese garrison blocking the main path in the ruins of a castle at Coseria. The garrison could present a threat to Bonaparte's advance if not dealt with, so he decides to send Augereau to storm it, rather than waste time bypassing it. Despite Augereau's significant numerical advantage, which is growing as his column begins arriving, the assault is beaten back by the well-fortified defenders, and nearly 1,000 French are lost, before the castle finally surrenders the following day. The assault on Coseria proves to be a costly but valuable lesson for Bonaparte, who learns to avoid hasty attacks on fortified positions later in the campaign.
Wow. Great quote.
As Coseria is resisting Augereau, Massena's advance on Dago likewise stalls. Massena is sobered by the Austrians' well-fortified position, and he believes that they have a significant force there. So he decides to wait for the remainder of his division to arrive before taking the village. Bonaparte is also informed that there is an Austrian buildup in Dago, so he leaves the advance on Piedmont to Augereau in order to return to Dago to support Massena. In fact, it is defended only by the battered remains of Argento's force and a small Piedmontese garrison, which anxiously await the arrival of fresh soldiers from Vukasovic. At daybreak on the 14th, Bonaparte, having taken command from Massena, orders the assault to begin. Massena leads a column in a frontal assault on the village, as La Harpe outflanks the Austrians to the left, and General La Salette, advancing on the east bank of the Bormida, severs their only path of escape. Outnumbered 2-1, and with their only line of retreat under threat, the already demoralized Austrians break and rapidly fall back towards Arcueil. Bonaparte, believing he has once more sent the Austrians into a comprehensive withdrawal, turns his attention back to shattering the Piedmontese, taking Massena and some of his division with him. The remaining soldiers from Massena's division are left to occupy the region surrounding Dago and to forage for supplies. As Argento's scattered forces flee, Vukasovic finally arrives before dawn the next morning with 3,500 reinforcements. Vukasovic's Austrians catch the remaining French troops at Dago by surprise in the early morning hours, tearing through the scattered and weakened French division.
Contradicting what I said earlier, fighting in mountainous terrain or hills is one hell of a way to catch your enemies off guard if you can do it. Because this is early in Napoleon's campaign, it's something you don't hear about later on, sort of mid to later on in Napoleon's conquests of Europe, is being caught by surprise.
The French flee southwards, abandoning the artillery they had captured the previous day. Once again, Bonaparte turns back to Dago, entrusting Augereau and General Serrières with his advance on Piedmont. Bonaparte redirects Massena's and La Harpe's divisions to return with him to Dago. On his return, Massena also gathers his fleeing troops from Dago to rejoin for the attack. French counterattacks begin in piecemeal, as Massena arrives first and is later joined by La Harpe. Fighting sweeps back and forth across the village, but Vukasovic's resolute defense holds late into the afternoon, inflicting heavy losses on the French. Vukasovic had hoped to receive reinforcements from Argento's division once they realized his success in Dago, but Argento's troops are still shaken by their defeat and are in no condition to support Vukasovic. The French numerical superiority begins to show. Outnumbered more than 4-1, Vukasovic clings on desperately, but cannot stop the French from breaking through and
Gotta be overrun.
the town. Vukasovic has no option but to retreat and rejoin the main army, concentrating at Arcueil. Although the Austrian losses were more than double those of the French, the continuous retaking of Dago has cost Bonaparte precious time, and compels him to leave behind many additional men to keep watch on the Austrian army.
Yeah, he doesn't want to waste any more time.
As Bonaparte launches his offensive against the Austrians, General Colley is working tirelessly to concentrate his Piedmontese army. By the morning of the 14th, he has amassed the bulk of his army at Montezemolo, but concerned by French General Serrières' advance from the south, and by news of the initial Austrian defeat at Dago, he decides to pull back to Cheva. Augereau pursues Colley, but after a poorly organized and half-hearted assault, is halted in front of the intimidating Piedmontese defenses. April 16th is a day of rest, reconnaissance, and repositioning for Bonaparte. The following morning, having received confirmation that the Austrians are indeed retreating towards Alessandria, Bonaparte renews his offensive against the Piedmontese. However, realizing that the entire French army is concentrating against him, and that the Austrians are moving further away, Colley decides to fall back with his main force to an even more imposing defensive position behind the Corsaglia River. He does leave a garrison in the fortress at Ceva, which stubbornly refuses to surrender when the French army arrives. Having learned his lesson at Caesarea, Bonaparte simply bypasses the fortress, moving up towards Colley's new position. Bonaparte decides to dislodge Colley from the Corsaglia River with a two-pronged assault. Augereau will attack at the confluence of the Tanaro and Corsaglia rivers, while Serrier, advancing with two columns, will force his way through the village of San Michele. Massena, meanwhile, is to remain in reserve to support these operations. Early in the morning of the 19th, Serrier's division charges towards the San Michele bridge, while Augereau tries to find another way across the swollen Tanaro River. But the Piedmontese have had time to prepare. Holding the high ground behind an impassable river, Colley's troops are formidable. Serrier's men, forced to rush the bridge, are decimated by Piedmontese cannon fire, and are driven back, for now. In late morning, a small group of Piedmontese pickets, attempting to return to the main army, are noticed and followed by French skirmishers, who observe them crossing an unguarded aqueduct. The French rush a demi-brigade across and launch a surprise attack from the south, while Serrier renews his attack from the east, successfully taking San Michele. Rather than pressing their advantage, the ill-supplied French, elated by success, descend into undisciplined looting, giving the Piedmontese time to regroup. Just as with Dago, the French are once again caught unaware by a strong counterattack. Serrier's men, on the verge of victory, are forced into a disorderly retreat back across the river to their starting positions. Bonaparte's attack has failed. His men, hungry, tired, and stung by their recent defeat, are on the verge of mutiny. Few supplies can reach the army through the winding mountain passes. Time is Bonaparte's greatest enemy. He needs victory soon, or he will be forced to concede defeat. Colley has his own dilemma. If the French are able to break through or outflank his line, the Piedmontese army will collapse. Even though Beaulieu is turning back from Alessandria to help the Piedmontese, delays in communication leave General Colley believing that the Austrians are too far to provide support. Colley, weighing the strength of his position after the near disaster at San Michele, makes the fateful decision to abandon his defenses on the Corsaglia River in order to find a new defensive line near Mondovì. On the evening of the 20th, the Piedmontese light campfires to conceal their withdrawal. But Bonaparte, suspicious by the lack of activity, has sent scouts across the river who discover the evacuation. Despite the poor condition of his army, Bonaparte views this as his best opportunity to defeat the Piedmontese by catching them before they can establish a new defensive position. By 10 a.m. on the 21st, Serrier's lead brigade descends from the mountain passes around the surprised Piedmontese rearguard. Heavy fighting breaks out, but as the French bring up cannons and grow in numbers, the unprepared Piedmontese crumble, and their general Deschamps is killed. The remaining soldiers of the rearguard fall back to the protection of the main army. Colley had planned to set up his defense along the river Alera. However, when he arrives, he is dismayed to find the area unsuitable. Difficult terrain and the lack of entrenchments on a position that can be easily outflanked forces Colley to continue on past Mondovì. But his uneasy troops are bottlenecked in the small town and movement is slow. The arrival of the fleeing Piedmontese rearguard and the death of the popular and brave General Deschamps are enough to send the army into chaos. Order and discipline collapse as the soldiers hastily began ransacking their own town before retreating, leaving behind valuable equipment and munitions. A triumphant Bonaparte marches into Mondovi that evening. His troops, reinvigorated by their easy victory, pause at Mondovi for much-needed rest and resupply. With his army crumbling and his finances strained, King Victor Amadeus III of Piedmont, Sardinia decides to open negotiations with the French in general to bring an end to the war. General Colley, now with only 10,000 men scattered around Carrasco, requests an armistice with Bonaparte. Knowing that Colley's forces are broken and demoralized, Bonaparte refuses and instead demands harsh concessions while continuing the invasion into the heart of Piedmont. Generals Augereau and Massena begin a joint advance up the Tanaro River towards Carrasco, while Serrurier captures Trinita. Believing his army too weak to hold back the French, Colley initiates yet another difficult retreat to Carmagnola, just 12 miles south of the capital. His exhausted army drags itself through relentless rain and bitter cold as they make their retreat. The tattered remains of the army finally begin gathering at Carmagnola, but the Piedmontese are in no condition to fight as the French continue their relentless advance. On the 25th of April, the French take Carrasco, and the following day, Bonaparte enters Alba. Meanwhile, La Harpe is pushing towards Acqui with his division, threatening to engage with Beaulieu's unsupported forces. Beaulieu, who has been preparing to assist Colley's ragged army, is furious to learn the Piedmontese attempts at negotiation with Bonaparte. The uneasy alliance between Austria and Piedmont falls apart as Beaulieu begins preparations for a retreat across the Po River, ransacking his former allies' villages along the way. Without the support of the Austrians, and with his army now completely unable to resist the French onslaught, King Victor has no alternative but to capitulate to Bonaparte's demands. The Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia is forced to give up territory, hand over control of strategic fortresses and bridges to the French, provide munitions and other supplies to Bonaparte's army, and allow unrestricted French movement across their territory. Napoleon Bonaparte, in the span of 2 short weeks, has delivered a much-needed military triumph to France. Hard work, coupled with the promise of riches and glory, has transformed undisciplined, ill-equipped soldiers into a formidable force that inflicted nearly 12,000 casualties.
Or some people say making soldiers out of scoundrels.
Almost twice its own losses, across 6 battles. His bold planning, innovative tactics, and speed of operations has led to the destruction of Piedmont's entire army and the abrupt retreat of the Austrians. The rapid success of this campaign provides an early glimpse of what will come. Bonaparte's military mastery will eventually propel him to become one of history's greatest conquerors.
This video was inspired by Epic History TV's Napoleon War series. I highly recommend viewers watch their videos if they have not already done so. For those interested, please see the link in the description. So yeah, they got the inspiration from Epic History TV, so I'll definitely be looking forward to the next video from PMF Productions about Napoleon's conquest into Italy. So yeah, this has been whoops. Let's get that off. So yeah, this has been another interesting. It's been an interesting video by PMF Productions. If you like this reaction, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you.